Pause. All right, I do hear that feedback. And then if I want to pause it. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Christy and I serve on the SWAPTA board. I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar about optimizing meter collections and fighting fraud with operational visibility. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Catherine Beatty. Catherine is the Executive Vice President of Customer Experience at TES Technology, where she leads support, implementation, and operation teams. With over 2 decades of experience in the parking industry, she brings a wealth of operational knowledge combined with strong focus on fraud prevention and customer-focused innovation. Catherine holds an MBA and is a certified fraud examiner, combining strong academic credentials with a deep commitment to operational excellence. And as a fun fact about Catherine, when she is not working to streamline parking ecosystems, she and her husband run a raptor rescue in Tennessee. So with that, I will turn it over to Catherine to kick off today's session.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. And welcome, everybody. As she said, we're going to go over fraud as it relates to meter and on-street enforcement as a whole. And I'm going to be focusing on kind of that and some things that you can do to help prevent fraud within your on-street and metered operations. And for those of you who don't know, I have an extensive background in internal auditing and fraud. I'm also a certified fraud examiner, which basically means I can testify in court against the findings that I find within a particular operation or facility or research that I do. So just a little bit about me in addition to the bio. All right, so why is this important? So let's start there. So why this matters is, parking meter operations can be very vulnerable to not just fraud, but inefficiencies and revenue leakage. It's not as tightly controlled as other parking environments are. It's a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of based on timing and consistency issues. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to on-street, as opposed to a fixed location that has, let's say fixed parks equipment or gates or things of that nature. The nature of on-street is a lot more open. So I kind of like to think of it as the difference between an Apple phone and an Android phone. Apple is very regulated and Androids are very not. That's kind of how on-street is. There's a lot of regulations, but we let everybody in. So it might be time to think about your visibility processes, the tech that you're using, your collections processes, and how to build community trust within your environment, because as we know, on-street probably sees the most aggressive behavior from its actual customers than any other parking type out there. We all experience it, but on-street experiences it more than anybody else. So let's talk about that. So there's basically 2 kinds of frauds within our industry. We've got the internal risk, which is your collection staff, procedural gaps, blind spots within your technology, whether that be LPR or cameras, or just your process flow in general. And then there's the external risk that's associated with our industry as a whole. You've got the public perception of what your operation may or may not be doing. We've all heard about how, the compliance officer is just sitting there in the bushes waiting to jump out 2 minutes after I've expired, when we all know that's not exactly what happens at all. But customers see that perception. Customers are always looking for loopholes to beat the system. There's very few industries out there where your biggest issue to revenue loss is your own customers, stealing basically, or trying to beat the system or hack the system. It's very much like retail that way. So loss prevention is really about loss prevention from your own customers in a lot of cases. And it comes down to the blame game, like whose fault is it for what? Is it the signage? Is it the customer? Or some of them, it's just a culture of criminal behavior. There's some municipalities that struggle in general because it's just the nature of where they're located or the type of population or the size of the population that they have, and whether or not they feel entitled to parking privileges more than any other city that might be of like similar size, but maybe it's in a different region where they don't have the same philosophy. So these are all things that can impact and have an impact on your fraud landscape as a whole. All right, so let's talk about external risks. All right, so we all have the customers where they just walk by the machine and we're like, nope, I didn't see it. I'm not going to pay. Or they're like, I'm going to play the lottery today and see if I don't get caught, and they just play the odds. So we're battling that particular issue. All right. So then you're battling the ones that you give a citation to, and they're all like, giving you that very nice, pleasant smile, and they take the citation and throw it on the ground or throw it on the floor. Again, very few industries have a customer base that react to this way. If I go into Walmart and I don't want to pay, I don't get to behave this way. You know what I mean? Like if I do, they're calling the cops. It doesn't happen in a parking environment. There's this sense of entitlement. It actually kind of reminds me of like if you get the wrong cup of coffee at the Starbucks line. Some people go crazy when you give them the wrong cup of coffee. They just think it's part of their entitlement sometimes, or they just really love coffee. Um, but again, we saw all kinds of disgruntled customers in our environment. All right. So really the big difference here is the human element. That's really what makes a difference. And that human element's on both sides. It's on our side as the operator and as the staff managing the operation, and it's on their side with how they engage with us as the parking provider. So it's really important to make sure that we train our staff to be, let's say, take the higher road in these types of realities. Okay. 99% of the time, your staff's nice all the time anyway. That's just who they are. You wouldn't hire them if they're not good people and good employees and good, have approachable personalities. But they get tested and challenged every single day. And one of the biggest things we can do is teach our staff how to handle that engagement and how to handle that in a way where we're not escalating the situation, that we're de-escalating it. So what I always like to tell people is when they talk loud, you should talk softer. If they take a step forward, you should take a step back, and just try to lessen the intensity within the environment when you're talking with customers in particular. And increased
That
visibility
was
can
it.
really, oh, sorry. Did somebody have a question?
That's it.
Okay. Increased visibility is also something that's very helpful. I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail in another slide. But the other thing is you want to teach your staff how to look for red flags within the
I fix that. I stay away.
operation as well. Okay, so next, I wanted to talk to you about saturation patrols. Now, many of you might know, have heard of saturation patrols in the law enforcement environment, okay? So basically a saturation patrol, I like to think of it as, let's say you have a stage, a rock stage, and you're at, you're at Ozfest and you're at a rock festival. Basically, saturation patrol is when you come in and you basically block the stage so that nobody else can get on that stage except the acts that you want to get on that stage, okay? So you're controlling that environment to make sure that only the people that need to be in that space and that are in the space using it for the right reasons are there. And that's what I like to think of as saturation patrols, is it's during those peak times and you want to ensure that everything is going smoothly within your community. In this particular case, within our parking operation, we can do this technique called saturation patrols. This is a really interesting proven strategy that's been being adopted within the enforcement arena recently. I was exposed to it recently in the city of Knoxville when an operator out there had hired somebody who was ex-law enforcement, and he started doing saturation patrol techniques on a surface lot. And this surface lot, to give you an idea, was about 210 spaces, but it produced over $500,000 a month in revenue. It was next to a courthouse where a lot of people get sworn in for their citizenship. And so it had constant turnover. Like this lot would turn over 2 or 3 times a day. And they noticed they were getting an increase in citations, an increase of people not paying, increase in vandalism, homelessness, things of that nature. So this new manager who came in, who was ex-law enforcement, started using saturation patrol techniques on the lot. He started walking the lot at peak times, and he wasn't walking the lot as an enforcement officer. He basically just walked the lot in uniform, and he would just kind of lightly pick up, trash, leaves, things of that nature, wipe down the machines, and he kind of just piddled around on the lot and walked it and was just visible during peak times. And most of the times he would just kind of head nod at customers, maybe say hi to them. And he really only engaged if they looked like they were having problems, like if it looked like they were lost and needed directions, or if they were reading the machine and couldn't quite figure out whether or not to pay or how much to pay for, or whether or not they paid in advance or not. He would then ask them questions and help them through the process. Well, just being on the lot and asking those questions during the peak times, his revenue started to go up. And also, he was still writing citations, but the citation appeals process really started to improve. People were appealing their tickets less because Really, they understood why they got a ticket, that they were in violation. They didn't try to challenge it. They didn't blame it on signs or that it wasn't, obvious. They just started noticing that our revenue was going up and people were paying more on the way in, and they weren't having to write as many citations. And then when they were writing citations, they weren't getting as peeled as often. And so it really started to change the dynamic of the revenue of this operation. Well, in addition to that, when he would go around during off-peak times and actually, do the enforcement, and then he would go back on off-peak time and just walk the lot again, he started talking to the homeless, asking them like, hey, can I get you some water? Hey, if you're just walking through the lot and you're not bothering my customers, I don't have a problem with that. But, if you approach my customers, then I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And, please don't make me be that person that has to call, law enforcement and hit you with a citation, with a trespassing citation. So he started talking to the homeless population, and he started actually, it was really funny. He started bringing candy bars, and he basically said like health food candy bars. And he would say, look, if you guys walk through my lot and treat it kindly, I'll give you a candy bar if I see you, and just be respectful. Don't go through my trash. If you go through the trash, pick it up. Don't leave a mess behind. If you respect my lot, I'll respect you. And that's exactly what started happening. The homeless stopped going through the trash on the lot. They stopped bothering the customers. They would come by, they would say hello, they'd get their candy bar for the day and a bottle of water, and then they would just go on their way. And it was such a minor thing that he was doing, but because he was being respectful to them, they in return started being respectful back and stopped bothering his location. So the vandalism went down, so his revenue went up, and the safety factor on his operation went up as well. So it's just a really interesting technique as it relates to using something that law enforcement uses on a regular basis within neighborhoods to convert that type of philosophy into a parking lot. So just a really interesting way to address that in a parking operation. All right, so this is the case study, and I wanted to give you an idea. So he increased his revenue by 20% right off the bat, and then he had a 10% reduction in appeals. He also had reduced vandalism on the lot. And as I said, the homelessness really stopped bothering his location and his lot. And after a while, they even stopped cutting through. They started walking around. So there was increased cleanliness, and this customer satisfaction overall was really good. When they did their surveys every year, there was an increase of 40% in the people that were responding. And these were people that were parking in these lots every single day. The lawyers that worked at the courtroom, the local businesses, monthly parkers that were associated with the Class A office building next door, they all started to make comments and call and fill out the surveys because they were just so excited to see such a difference in the way the lot was performing and how they felt safe going to their vehicles at night. The women no longer felt like they needed to be escorted by a police officer or a security guard from their building. It was just overall a really nice experience. So it was such a minor thing to do, to just be on the lot and be visible, but not actually there as an enforcement officer, but just to just be around and be visible. Okay, so that was your kind of external risk factor and how you address it. Internal risk is a whole other beast, all right? And we've all experienced it in different levels, but let's talk about it. Kind of here's where it goes wrong. We focus a lot on manual errors in collection, or manual errors or manual processes within the collections of our meters in a lot of cases. I don't know of many cities that don't accept cash at all. So at some point, there's always some type of cash component, and how we're controlling that cash component and collecting that can add to a lot of areas where things might go wrong. Another thing is lack of audit trail and audit controls. I know most of you probably know this, but every multi-space machine comes with an audit report. And those reports are usually trackable either by a report number or a non-resettable counter. And it's really important to make sure that you're tracking those and not missing out. And we'll go into that in more details, but that's often something that gets missed when I come in and have to do an internal audit. Is one of the areas where I find theft. And then you have to worry about tampering and skimming. And then visibility into process flow. Sometimes you just don't know what the flow is of the process. Just from not paying attention, or maybe things have changed and you just haven't kept up with it, and so things get missed. So not following through on compliance with your procedures is another area where people go wrong. So we're going to kind of look at these individually for a few minutes. All right, so this is an old picture. I don't know because I can't really see any of you guys on there, but if I did, I'd say show of hands of how many people remember these kinds of meters. They used to come with square trays or cups with no lids. Yep, I see some thumbs up there. Thanks, Andy. So it used to be you would just have a canister with no top on it, no protection. These are still available in a lot of cities and a lot of locations. And you would empty it and you would just dump it into some type of like bucket or like a vault or something. And a lot of times it was one for me, one for you, one for me, one for you. And a lot of this money would just kind of disappear. So you want to make sure if you can and if you have the option to avoid using these types of canisters. There's a lot of different lids and replacement canisters that you can use on some of these older models if you have access, especially the old Dunkin' meters. But this is something you definitely want to make sure you're controlling. And if you have meters like this, you want to make sure that you're entering them and rotating two-man teams so they try to keep each other honest. You want to make sure that you're rotating not only when you pick up, so it's not consistent every day where somebody could figure out your patterns and potentially, rob your enforcement collectors, your revenue collectors, but you also want to rotate it so the staff doesn't get too comfortable and they keep an eye on each other and have a checks and balance that way. So it's just one of the ways on the older systems that this was done. All right, so on the newer systems, you have the cash vaults. Again, this is an older one. Most of these are sealed containers now, but how many people have your maintenance person also has access on his keys to open the vaults of the money that comes into the machines? Now, you should be able to do maintenance and repairs on these machines without actually having to have a key to the vault. Even if there's a jam, most jams can be cleared without actually giving your keys to somebody in the, let's say, maintenance department who works on these meters or these machines. So it's really important to make sure that whoever is accessing the vaults does not have actually access to the money. There needs to be a separation there. If they do have to have access to both, you want to make sure, again, that you're tracking those audit reports that come out of the machine, much like this ticket's coming out of this one. You want to make sure you're tracking those non-resettable counters or those report numbers. Not too long ago, I was in a city on the north east coast of actually, I'd say more Midwest. And they found out that one of the meter collectors was going in between the routes on some of the slower routes, and they were entering the meters and zeroing out the reports and then not turning them in. And so they would empty, let's say the machine on Monday, and around Wednesday or Thursday, he'd go back in, empty it, zero it out, and then wait for them to collect it again. And they just thought the revenue was declining. They never thought to notice that the reports were not in sequential order anymore and that the machine was getting zeroed out and that person was taking the difference of that money. So this is why it's really important to make sure that you have control over your keys and separation of duty there so that the person opening the machines isn't the same person that can open the bank vault inside. The collector should never be able to open the bank vault. Those should be controlled by those in the money room or the bank if you're taking it directly to the bank account, or if you're taking it to a money room, those are the only ones that should have the key to actually open the vaults. It's also best practice to not open the vaults out in the field and just pull the money out. I see this a lot in operations where to save time, they'll just give the keys out. The person will pull the money out of the vault. They'll wrap the audit report around it, stick it in their bag and go along their way. Again, what if that report doesn't get turned in and you're not tracking? It can go missing. There's some controls there. But then somebody's also seeing how much money or cash you're putting into a backpack or a container or whatever the case may be, and you're opening yourself up again for risk of being robbed. So whenever possible, it's better to replace the canister with an empty canister. So it's always good to have a spare backup of these canisters so that you can then empty the vault out, log it, put the audit report in it, take it someplace to safely be counted in a controlled environment with limited access. And then you put a blank vault back in the machine. And it's really good to make sure your vaults are sequentially numbered as well, so that if you're taking out vault number, 1, and you replace it with vault number 2, you should know the next day that you're taking 2 out and putting 1 back in. And so again, it's important to keep track of your vaults as well to make sure that some of those aren't being swapped out or missed or exchanged for one that's maybe a full one's being exchanged for one that's partially full, and they're trying to make it look like it brought in less money. These are all different ways that I've seen people try to beat the system when it comes to fraud. So another thing are these canisters. I don't know if any of you guys remember these. I remember pushing one of these around back in the day when I ran enforcement. And oh my gosh, did that thing get heavy. Thank God it was on wheels. And it used to like go up to my truck and hook up onto the back trailer because it would get so heavy I couldn't even lift it into the vehicle. But it's really important if you're using a canister method like this that A, they are sealed and locked like these are with a padlock so that people can empty the coin into it and it's in a secured environment without the ability to access it. However, it's also important to make sure that you order and number these as well. I recently was doing an audit on an enforcement provider, and they had these wonderful vaults on wheels, and they would send out 6 vaults every single day, and they were numbered 1 to 6. And they noticed their revenue was going down, but when they'd get the vaults back and they would open them, they'd count the coin, and they just couldn't figure out why the revenue was short. Well, it turned out what the collections team, because it was a team of individuals, were doing is that they would take the canisters 1 through 6 out, and they always knew that they never made it to the 6th canister. It was always empty. So what they did is they replaced the lock on the canister, and what they did is they swapped them out. And so they basically had a dummy, like a canister in there that looked legit, looked locked, looked like they didn't have a key. They used the same padlock as all the other ones, and they put a different number on it, and they switched them out. So they would then take one of the full canisters and swap it out with one of the empty ones. And that's how they were actually getting by the canister method. They basically made their own duplicate canister from one of the extra ones that was in the office that always went back empty. They basically cut off the lock and replaced it. And they just ended up getting away with a lot of money. We eventually had to catch it on video to see exactly how they were doing it. So again, it's important that whatever your method is doing is that you're thinking about loopholes and methods, and are you double tracking? You know, if they don't always fill 5 canisters or 6 canisters, then don't let them take that many. If they need extra, you could always bring it to them. They could always come back. Or again, if you have them signed out, make sure you check the locks, make sure you check the keys, that they haven't been tampered with or replaced with a lock that looks very similar that you actually don't have a key to, but they have a key to. These are ways in which they can beat the system. So crazy, but it happens. All right, so another thing that we have to look for and is when the parking enforcement person might be working with the customer in exchange for something. So for example, there was a location that I reviewed where the compliance officer was giving free parking to the person who owned the pizza parlor, and he was giving free parking to the person who owned the bistro, and to the person who owned the little kind of convenience store. And he would not write them tickets every day, and he would give them free parking. And in exchange, on Mondays, he would go to the pizza joint and get free lunch. And on Tuesday, he would go to the bistro and get free lunch. And then he would go to the, Quickie Mart to get his free, Coke or snacks or whatever. And basically had this great bartering system going where all these vehicles were not getting ticketed or paying on a regular basis. And he was getting, bartering system basically in place. So it's really important to pay attention to repeat vehicles that are on your lot, and do spot audits and spot checks to make sure that there's not vehicles that are continuously being left out of the system. They're not being logged in as a parker, or they're not part of your API for monthly parking that would flag that or catch that. They don't have a registered license plate, things of that nature. It's really important to make sure that you're looking for those kinds of things when you do spot checks on a lot, so that you don't have somebody getting too comfortable and too familiar with their customer base to where they can exchange for favors, so to speak. Unfortunately, this does happen. And it's horrible when you see it, because it's a bad experience for the customer ultimately as well, because when it does get discovered, then that person's also, kind of mixed up in it and feels a little bit taken advantage of. So it's something to be looking for and thinking about in your operations. All right, so fraud detection, what kind of tech works? Routing and tracking for GPS and audit logs are always a great thing. How many of you, by raise of hands or claps or the reactions within this, how many of you guys have some type of GPS system or an alerting system that lets you know when somebody's in violation, and it can pre-route you to where you need to go? Can see if there's any reactions. Really, I'm surprised at that. Oh, I see one. Andy, you just seem to be on fire today. This is a really great way to kind of track things. So most enforcement vehicles should have a GPS tracker. So it's really important to watch and see how long are your enforcement or compliance personnel on the lot? Do they only come in and they're in and out in 5 minutes? If that's the case, they're probably not doing a really good job enforcing. Even the best LPR system on a car can't drive and scan everything that quickly. So how long are they spending on the lot? How long in between? How often do they have gaps? Do they have large amounts of times in between the routes that they're not on site somewhere? These are great logs to track too, to see if they're driving your vehicles in an unsafe manner. Like, are they speeding? Are they cutting curves, turns, running red lights, things of that nature. But route tracking in particular is a really great way to track your flow and process of your team, and to see if they're doing things on the proper schedule and routing that you want them to. So it's a really good tool to use. If you don't have it, they're very affordable nowadays and easy to install. You don't have to have a massive system in place to get these vehicles up and running and marked with GPS. So if it's something you don't have, you might want to look into it. I would also recommend anti-tamper hardware. So for example, you want to make sure that your locks can't easily be replaced or changed out. Are your machines controlled that way? Are your keys controlled? Are they, one time I saw somebody lose a set of keys, by no fault of their own. They just set them down and walked away, and then forgot they, left them on the machine while they were working on it. When they went back to go get them, they were gone. And unfortunately, it was the same key for every pay station and meter in the city. And they ended up having to spend $30,000 to rekey all the machines, because the person who took it realized they could get into any machine, and of course started taking all of the revenue out of the machines. So you want to make sure that you have things that are tamper-proof, and you want to make sure you have good key control. Automated reconciliation systems are a great thing as well. Like, when you have these wonderful technology that creates these wonderful reports that tells you exactly how much money was in, what was jammed, how often it was jammed. You've got these reports that'll tell you how much of it was in fives, tens, ones. I mean, a lot of these have an amazing amount of detail. They also tell you like what was collected, what was given out and changed, what your vault should be, what order the machine was the last time it was emptied. If you track all of these things, they do make for a very secure, safe system. Nothing's foolproof, but it gets pretty darn close to it, as long as you're tracking the right measurable automations that are built in within your system. So make sure you're paying attention to those things. If you get alerts, don't ignore them and default them. I know we all get so many notifications in the day. I don't know about you, I hate sometimes that Lyft tries to notify me every time I get on a plane if I need a lift, and you just eventually get numb, or you silence, or you don't even recognize them anymore, or even worse, you turn off these notifications. Make sure you don't do that. Don't get complacent and ignore these notifications. They're there for a very important reason, to let you know an anomaly has occurred. And even if it's an annoyance and something that happens every day, it's still important to follow up on it. Programmable keys. This goes back to if you're, could potentially lose your keys, or if you have turnover in your staff. They make these wonderful electronic keys now that are no bigger than, they're even smaller than a key fob for a regular car. And you can program them. You just kind of put them into the programmer, just like you would kind of like a hotel key. You just plug the key in, you program it, you assign it to somebody, and it limits what they can have access to. And also, if they ever terminate or leave your employment, or if the key ever gets lost or misplaced, you can immediately shut it off without having to rekey everything. These are really great systems. If you haven't used one or seen one, I highly recommend looking at them. It's a really great way to manage your key control in any operation, let alone on street, because on street requires usually a lot of different keys to access all the different machines and components. And this is a really great way to control that and have safety in mind, but also an audit trail. You can tell whose key was used when and where and how often. And that's another great tracking mechanism to deter fraud, but also to see who actually might be perpetrating the fraud, if that's the case, or at least whose keys might be. And then again, real-time fraud alerting. This is very easy with AIs now. A lot of, again, our systems are built to give us red flags. If any of you have LPR systems out there, it's constantly letting you know, hey, you have some people in compliance over here, or hey, there's an alert over here that something might be happening, or hey, looks like somebody might have bumped your machine because the sensor went off that looks like it was hit by a car. All of these things are really important, and it's important to make sure that you keep them turned on and functioning within your operation, so that you are aware that these happened. It's no different than we had parks equipment in a garage, and you'd want to know if a vehicle backed out, or because it might potentially mean your gate or something's broken. It's the same concept on street. You want to make sure you're looking at those alerts. If it didn't read a plate right, why didn't it read it right? Was it something wrong with the plate? Could it be fraudulent? Was it because it's snowing out? We need to maybe have a different sensitivity level, or clean plates off on the lot as we're doing the reads. All of these things make a difference, and paying attention to those alerts can help you be successful in that environment. Okay, so what does success look like? Well, actually, it's really not that bad. Success is pretty easy in these environments. Your revenue should go up and your complaints should go down. It's basically that simple. So if you're doing things right, your revenue should go up, your customer sat should go up, you should have a reduction in meter downtime. If you're paying attention to your lot and watching these things, you're also going to notice when your meters aren't working correctly, or when they're having trouble or running out of paper or not giving the proper change, or any of these things. When you're monitoring your lots and in them as often as we recommend or talk about in this meeting, is you're going to see a reduction naturally in your downtime of meters, because you're going to notice things and get to them quicker and have them repaired quicker. You're also going to have fewer complaints, and you're going to have more voluntary payments. As people start to see you paying attention to your facility, and if you do the saturation patrols and they see somebody walking around and they know that somebody's caring about that facility and paying attention to it, they're less likely to walk by that machine, especially if they've walked by it in the past and then the person spoke to them about it and said, hey, this is a pay in advance lot, or they get a citation after the fact. And then when they go to dispute it, they'll say, well, did you see the gentleman on the lot? Well, yes, I did, but I didn't think this, or I didn't think that. You get all the excuses, but ultimately you'll get fewer complaints when you're adding that visibility and that layer of relationship building there. Just having a simple hello and saying hi to somebody might make them double think what they were intending to do, whether it was incorrect or not. They might be more conscious about what they're doing, whether or not they walk up to the machine and look at it, or decide to pay on their phone, or start to ask questions about, I was thinking about cheating, but let me go ahead and talk to this person because they said hi. And then all of a sudden you're engaging in a different way and you're changing their behavior. And your appeals rate should drop. People are less likely to appeal tickets when they know they got them justly, and they know that you're paying attention to the lot and have cameras in place and people in place to ensure that these things are looked at. Then they're more likely to not really appeal something that they know they actually have done wrong. So these are really great markers that you can look at to see if you're having success in these particular areas. All right. So what are some of the next steps you could take? All right. I would highly recommend auditing your current meter collection process. Are there loopholes? Is it one person going out by themselves, or do you have a two-man team or two-person team? It is best whenever possible, budget-wise, to do them in teams and rotating teams if you can. And is your route conducive? Is it safe? Is there enough lighting? Is there enough visibility from them getting to and from their vehicles to the machines to allow it to be a safe transfer? Go around and watch your meter collection process, and watch it with actually do it with your team, but then also watch it from afar and see what's going on. Does your team have situational awareness when they're out there? I can't tell you how many times I've been watching meter collection teams go out there and collect the meters, and they're not really paying attention to what's going on around them. And I've been able to go in and maybe, take something out of their company vehicle, or swap out a bag. So are they being aware to what's going on in the surrounding? I've even been able to sneak up on a team one time, and if I had bad intentions and was wanting to rob them, I would have gotten pretty close to be able to do it. So watch your teams and see how they're processing and collecting money, and is it being done in a safe way where they are watching what's going on and paying attention. Okay, because they're going to be their best advocates to know what's going on around them. You want to add visibility during peak times. This is where that saturation patrol technique can come into place, is, during your busiest morning ingress or even evening ingress, or in a lot of cases at lunchtime, depending on the type of on-street operation you're having. It really matters having somebody there, not from the enforcement side of it, but just visibility, somebody to ask questions, somebody to talk, somebody to show that the lot's being paid attention to. Even if it's a vehicle driving around with a light on, even that makes a huge difference in how people perceive that lot. If they see that it's actively paid attention to, they're less likely to try to take advantage in some way. Whenever possible, implement smart fraud techniques. This would be LPR systems, facial recognition systems. There's so much you can do with AI now where you can train it to notice if somebody walks by a machine, parks their car and walks by the machine without paying or getting on their phone. You could get alerts for that. You can get alerts for people acting suspicious in the shadows on a lot now with AI based on cameras and security cameras and what you teach it to look for. There's all these great tools now where you can have AI do video analysis of your operation to determine like, hey, there's low light over here and there's somebody kind of hiding in the corner. Maybe we should alert and have somebody go check out that lot and make sure it's okay and that there's nothing unsafe going on there. Your AI tools can do this a lot now with, especially in the environment with videos and LPR systems in place. So it's really great to use that technology. This technology can also be used to zoom in on vehicles to see if they truly have damage. Maybe somebody claims their vehicle is damaged on the lot or broken into on the lot, and your video or your LPR system may have captured something in the background. And a lot of times AI can go in and analyze the video feed in the background and provide even more useful information. So it's a really great thing to look at, is that smart kind of detection within our technology. And then you can really empower your team by training them. Take your team through a situational awareness, exercise. There's so many of them that are free online on like YouTube that you can go look at. I know there's some great ones that get shown around at our conferences, but there's some really great YouTube videos of different situations where if you're not aware, you can miss things going on. Like there's one video that asks you to pay attention to how many people are buying a sub at a particular vendor on a street vendor. And then they ask you at the end, like, hey, it's great. Did you notice that 13 people bought subs? But did you also notice that somebody planted a suspicious bag in the background and that the pizza truck turned into a taco truck? And, did you notice that there was a monkey that walked through the middle of the scene? If you don't have situational awareness, you can miss some very important things that are going on in your operation, in your facility. And it could affect your safety. It could affect your customer safety. So it's really important to empower your team to look for these things, what to look for, how to respond when they do see something. Even positive things should be responded to. Thank people for doing the right thing, acknowledge it. But empower your staff to do that. And whenever possible, empower them to be able to give forgiveness when needed. Maybe somebody didn't pay on the way in because they were running late and you're getting there right when you're getting ready to write the citation. And maybe they have the authority to say, hey, you know what? If you go pay the machine right now, that $10 fee is a lot better than a $20 ticket. We'll call it good. I haven't started writing it. Go ahead. Or maybe they've written it, but they haven't put it on the car yet, and you can avoid it by the license plate. And you can prove that they went back in and paid it a couple of minutes later. If there's a way for you to give some of that back to your enforcement so that it doesn't have to be such a white, yes or no kind of situation, and you can give them the ability to show a little bit of grace sometimes when they need to, it's a great way to not only empower your team, but to help build that trust and relationship there, that it's not always about, us trying to get them 2 minutes after they expire. It just fosters good public engagement that way. And whenever possible, do public engagement activities on your facility or on your lot, offer donuts or coffee, put nice air fresheners as a thank you note on everybody's car one day. Or randomly on somebody, if they're getting their very first ticket, maybe randomly give them a warning, but then also put a nice little note on their car that says, hey, I gave you a one-time grace. Next time, here's how it works. And then maybe you give them a little pamphlet or something. There's so many different ways that you can foster that public engagement in a positive way. And remind people that, parking isn't entitled, but we're happy to help and be gracious with everything we need to do. But it's still a service that needs to be paid for. It's here for a reason. It serves a very valid purpose, especially with wanting to turn over spaces and control them for people visiting businesses in downtown. So just helping to remind the public of what that is sometimes can go a very, very long way. All right. So we've talked about some things that you can do. I've mentioned some of my challenges. Here's where you guys can step in. Do you have any questions? Do any of you want to share some similar experiences that you may have had or some different experiences? Now's the time.
Catherine, I'll go ahead and speak up. I just thought this was a really great presentation and very thorough and just really good reminders and refreshers. And you made me add PTSD a couple times. So,
Yeah, I know you know, Julie.
yes, indeed. But I really appreciated the content that you put together. Very thorough and just really great tips. So just thank you for that. I just really thought it was really a great session. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So Catherine, I want to echo Julie's comments. This was a great presentation. I am just curious, we in the city of San Luis Obispo are looking at options for, right now we contract out for our meter collections and we're looking at bringing that in-house.
Mhm.
And can you give your thoughts on which is better, or if there's any direction you can provide in that process? We have a significant decrease in cash payments is realistically the reason behind it.
So I'm sorry. So you're wanting to outsource your actual collections process?
No, we outsource it now,
Okay.
but our cash revenue has decreased so much that it's not really worth outsourcing anymore.
Mhm.
And so we're looking at bringing it in-house. And
Yes.
so can you speak to that? Like which option? And I know every agency is going to be a little bit different, but as it relates to fraud and your presentation, which option, or if you can give any guiding principles on these things?
Well, a lot of times it is more cost effective if it's not a lot of cash to bring it in-house and control it. The main thing there is just making sure you have separation of duties. You want to make sure that the people that are collecting the cash do not have access to the actual cash itself, and that wherever you're counting that money in a secured place is the one who would actually open, the secured canisters and things of that nature and process it. You want to make sure it's in a secured money room with videos and limited access there as well. Um, uh, and make sure that when they're in there, they have like no handbags, places for them to hide the money. It should be a very simple room where they can count money and they can fill out a deposit and process it, and all that's on camera, and they can't stick money in their pockets or whatever. And the person who's counting the money should also not have access to the audit report. They shouldn't know how much money should be there. That again should be separation of duty there. So if you're going to bring it in house, you might have, two people in the room counting the money, but then somebody else is reconciling their count and their deposit to the actual report itself that comes out of the machine, so that you have some separation there to make sure the money's flowing correctly. But I'm not surprised about looking to bring it in house. It can be very expensive to have armored cars and collections agencies do that when the cash just isn't there anymore.
Thank you. Thank you for your advice there.
Oh, no problem. Also, too, a lot of cities that are having that, they're not collecting it every day, or they do a rotating now where they'll collect a zone like once a month or once a week, because again, the cash just isn't there. So don't be afraid to spread it out if you need to. But if you do that, again, it's really important to make sure that you track your non-resettable report numbers to know if anything's gone missing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or anything I can help with? I can't figure out how to stop sharing on my screen because every time I hit stop sharing, it keeps sharing. Here we go. Found it.
All right, Catherine, I was trying to give people a chance to unmute. I was checking if there's anybody that I can help. If anybody's having a problem, just raise your hand. I can help with the unmuting. We've answered all the questions.
No, the same as what Julie said. I think this was all very good information. We have a lot of this stuff was just reminding me of everything that our internal audit team has been saying and preaching. So I know there's one of our auditors, her words were in the back of my mind as you were talking of all these reminders. So it's a lot of stuff there, and definitely the key thing. I've been at a location that had that same scare. Luckily, it was not as many meters, and it wasn't left on top of the meter, so they didn't know what it was for and never figured it out.
Ooh.
But the concern and the cost of some of those keys and just the time to swap them out. So yeah, that's a scary one that don't ever want to have happen to you.
Yeah, I agree. It's not fun. The other thing that you said is important too, Andy, is that it's easy when you get stuck in your day-to-day operation and you get pulled in so many different directions sometimes that you forget to pay attention to things that you normally would. It's natural. You only have so much bandwidth. So, and naturally, sometimes you stop paying attention to something because you need to pay attention to something else that's more important in the moment. And then you might forget to go back because it's just easy to get not necessarily complacent, but you just get distracted with your day-to-day life and operations. So sometimes these kinds of classes just help you remember, oh, you know what? I haven't done that in a little while. Maybe I need to go look at that again because it's just natural to get that way.
Good afternoon, Catherine. This is Ricardo. Can you hear me all right?
I can barely hear whoever just spoke.
Catherine, this is Ricardo. Can you hear me all right?
I can barely hear you.
How about now?
A little bit. I heard you say, how about now?
I know Christy was having issues with her microphone before.
Julianne, are you trying to speak?
Oh, there you are. We hear you now. Go ahead now, Christy.
Catherine, are you able to hear Julianne? Because I'm not able to hear, but it looks like that she was trying to speak.
No, I was only hearing you.
I'm able to hear Julianne.
I am too.
Well, does somebody want to repeat the question and I'll be happy to answer it?
I think Julianne was just speaking up to ask Christy if she needed help with her mic.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
No, I think I'm working.
I think we're good now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Does that wrap up all the questions for Catherine today? Looks like so. So I just wanted to thank you, Catherine, again for your time and your presentation. Very helpful and informative. And thank you everyone for also being here today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Kath.
good day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.